is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Fullmetal Alchemist, Brotherhood. Episode 61. He Who Would Swallow God. I almost called it The Man Who Would Swallow God, but he isn't a man, is he? And this dude is like, alright, now that I've swallowed God, I'm going to give myself a bit of a glow up. And I am going to straight up look like the prince at the end of Beauty and the Beast. And I was like, that's a good look. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Max for commissioning this episode. How are you doing out there, Max? So there is a lot packed into this. Really, when you step back and look at it, not a ton necessarily moves forward beyond a couple of really big plot points. And then there's a lot of pausing for people's reactions and sort of like their interpretations of what's going on here and there. But this is first of all, we start off by this guy essentially succeeding in what he set out to do. I was so startled that he just gets to do it, and they are able to undo it. But I didn't really think that we're going to simply get to see what success looked like for this thing. And what's weird to me is that even though he succeeds, the so-called sacrifices are not dead. I don't know what to make of that. How are they sacrifices if they didn't die? They're the ones that got sort of put into the vault and locked up and saved. I don't know if it's because he is planning on a second step to this plan, but I don't think so. The way he sits there and how sort of satisfied he appears to be, I don't really think that there was another step to this. I think this was it. He succeeded and he's done. And he tells them that he's proud of his sacrifices, but they all seem as startled as I was that they're still standing there. I think Izumi looks down at her stomach because that was where that eye opened and is just like, but wait, what the fuck? And as far as I can tell, the fact that Roy didn't choose to do the transmutation doesn't seem to be a factor in anything after all. I really thought that was going to play in somehow, and it was going to turn out to be significant that he didn't volunteer. And apparently I was just mistaken on that because it doesn't come up, and there's no real, there is obviously a flaw in the plan that Father didn't account for what Hohenheim was going to know and what he was going to do to prevent him from achieving his goal. But it doesn't have anything to do with Mustang as far as I can tell. So, let's see. Damien says, I think he took Ed's form this time. And Tyler says, young Hohenheim. If this is young Hohenheim, he could get it. He is way more jacked than Ed. 100% more jacked than Ed. The waist to shoulder ratio on this dude is insane. So, no offense, Ed, I am not trying to say that you are at all a weakling, but this man could go to a bodybuilder competition and do pretty well. And he even has extremely beefy forearms as well. He is just extremely jacked. And I always find it really funny, the idea that like maybe Jesus was also super jacked, because you'll see some of like, especially when they depict the crucifixion, they'll give him abs and stuff, depending. Usually it's meant to be that he's really skinny and his ribs are showing pretty prominently, but every now and then you get like a sort of swole Jesus, and I find that pretty amusing, because there's an idea of like what an elegant figure looks like for men and for women. And what if Jesus wasn't elegant? What if he was just kind of stubby, like me? I have a very long torso and very short arms and legs, like a corgi dog. My figure is not graceful or elegant. It's just what it is. And I'm not going to shit talk myself, but it's going to hit very different if it's me, you know? And this guy picks a figure now that he has, as he puts it, acquired God. I'm just going to say swallowed God. That I feel, if you're going to swallow God and take on any form you like, why the fuck aren't you just going to go to town? Can you imagine, like, getting to just look exactly how you want, tailor every single aspect of yourself? That's a dream. I have literally had dreams like that, where I could like just change my hair color at will or my eye color at will or whatever. And it just sounds so fun. Anyway, so yeah, he looks really great, except that as the episode goes on, things continue to happen that cause his veins to like bulge out in rage. And that really mars the effect of it all, because he kind of looks like he's got worms wiggling around under his skin. So enjoy it while it lasts, kids, because we only get about 10 minutes in before that shit's fucked up. So Ed is like, wait, there's no way he didn't take in God. That's not possible. And Hohenheim is like, oh, it is though. And that's when they all begin to realize that the Philosopher's Stone was created, that 50 million people have been used as fuel for this guy to achieve his ends. And Ed says bastard and tries to use alchemy to like fight at him. And he literally, Father just taps his finger and says, yeah, no, we're not doing that. And then says farewell and lifts a hand. And a tiny sun appears in his palm. Honestly, the extremely lazy expression on his face, combined with the like just cut physique, the dramatic hair, and it's doing that anime thing where some of it falls in like tendrils really sexily and some of it's sort of like back, but it's arranged. And that, like I said, sort of disdainful expression, and then the supernova power of the sun that he's holding. That is a pretty impressive look, coupled with the throne he's sitting on, which I would not have called it a throne. Like, before this scene, I was thinking of it as a weird, like, science-y chair. But the way this dude is sitting, it's a throne now. That's what it is. It has become a new thing. And there is just like an energy to this guy that I'm like, honestly, maybe you should just let him have this, guys. He seems to sort of have done what he wants and achieved godhood. And maybe it's time to tap out. And then all of a sudden, there's this weird pulse. And it's in the sun that he's holding. And he looks down and he's like, what the fuck was that? And Pride, who's watching all of this with one hand over one eye, which it turns out is because his face is falling off, is also kind of like, what is this? And then we have Hohenheim stepping in and is like, hey, so you had a big flaw in your plan. We've been plotting against you since the moment you decided to do this. Over a lot of years, we have all done calculations, and I have arranged my own philosopher's stones using the friends who reside within me in preparation for this very day. So we're finally getting the explanation of what it was that Hohenheim was like sending those souls off to do. And this is the kind of thing where I really like reveals like this, because it's the sort of reveal where if I stop to really think about it more in terms of like, oh, they are each their own philosopher's stone, maybe I would have gotten it. But I keep forgetting that each individual stone is its own soul. I am continually making this mistake where in my mind, philosopher's stones have become multiple stones. Like you have to use more than one person in order to create one at all. And that's not actually true. You can just use the one and it will make a 1-to-1 ratio, like sort of power. But the more you use, the more energy you're getting out of it. So because I was like forgetting that that could be just a one soul, the idea that they were each an individual philosopher's stone didn't even enter my mind. And another thing I got hung up on is the stone part, even though I know we have seen now, like, how many of them were just vials of red liquid. We have seen that a number of times now. But I keep thinking of a philosopher's stone as being stone, which is really limiting what I am realizing is a stone in the moment. So these people like drop out of his body onto the ground and they're little, like, you know, basically what just looks like blood. And they are each their own like power source being dispatched to different locations to set things up. And this is my favorite kind of reveal, when something makes so much sense that you feel like you should have figured it out, you know? And I'm really curious, like, if I was the only one who kept having the wrong interpretation of what a philosopher's stone was and like sort of letting these ideas about it trip them up. But I will just fully cop to that. I mean, you guys know I've been on here for too many hours to try and lie about what I was thinking now. And the only thing that I'm sort of curious about here, and I think that I have an explanation, but I want to ask you all. So we go to like this sort of voiceover as the camera pans over different areas in Amestris, and it's very much like it's all empty. Any place that there had been people is straight up empty. And then we hear these voices saying, so now it's time, we're doing what Hohenheim asked of us. And they begin to light up. And when we go back into that room, Father is like, they won't activate without a circle anyway, so what are you even doing? And Hohenheim says we do have a circle, and it's going to show up even if I get incapacitated. And it's the circle being cast over the city by the eclipse. This is genius, honestly. I love this idea. Would it work this way? Like, I don't think the physics of this would happen this way. It really does not matter. I am 100% fine with it. And Father is like, oh, do you really think that you can stop me? And Hohenheim is like, this is the entire reason I came back. And then he says, it's time you remembered your place, dwarf in the flask. And then we see the Philosopher's Stones activate, and all of them sort of arc this red light towards the center of the city. And it hits Father, and he's like, puts out the sun that he had been holding in his hand the whole time. And there's a moment where I was kind of like did it work? Because he's kind of slumped over, but he's still moving and he isn't saying anything. And then we see like the veins moving around underneath his skin. And then all of a sudden he screams and this red light begins to streak up out of him, like the light we get when we see them using alchemy. And for a second, I'm like, oh, okay, we're going to get to see this, like, exact some kind of damage on him, like the way that alchemy does, where blood is going to fly and, you know, blah, blah, blah. I was super duper not ready for what it actually is, which is essentially the alchemy is like yanking the door back open that's holding all of those souls in him. And they come pouring out in this torrential, like it's almost like a reverse whirlpool. And it's got like the faces all in it in this really creepy kind of phantasm looking design. And all of these souls go shooting back throughout the city and the like outside the farmland and everything. And we see everyone coming back to themselves. And what I thought was sort of interesting is that the spaces that we see during the voiceover, the voices are saying, yeah, it's time to do what Hohenheim said. But we don't actually see any like bodies. It's not until the souls begin to like actually shoot back down towards the city that we see bodies strewn around as people are waking up. And the first one that wakes up is a baby that starts crying. Then we've got a bunch of people. Everybody's like kind of coughing, which is the sort of thing that feels like a weird reaction, but also what kind of reaction would you get from putting somebody's fucking soul back in their body after it was taken away? Like, coughing is the best shorthand I know to sort of signify something very huge and dramatic just happened and is over now. And Winry describes it as having been in a vortex of anguish, which that's a hell of a fucking name. That's actually a really good like death metal name, Vortex of Anguish. So Hohenheim says back with himself and Ed, he's like, yeah, nothing more than the souls of the Xerxians he already had is inside. So that means that he's not going to be able to control God the way he was planning on being able to. And Father says, I can always create another stone. There are a billion humans I can draw energy from. And he comes at Hohenheim in this moment, all sweaty and drooling and just really looking like he has been through it, you know, like, and it's funny because I'm saying he has been through it, but he hasn't been through it. He's still going through it in this moment. So that's not really accurate. And he shoots what looks almost like a void sphere at Hohenheim, who catches it and chucks it upward. And this results in a hole going through several of the ceilings, which reminds us that Scar and Bradley are still fighting in this other area. And it shoots up into the air, like right out of the building. And May begins to use her power to pull on another like energy source. And she is drawing on this to protect them, creating a sort of like basic source that Hohenheim can use to hold back the attacks that Father is flinging at them. And reminder, she has these knives that she makes her circles with. And we see one of them sort of wobbling like it's about to get thrown over. And I really liked that bit of tension being added in because I don't feel like we've seen the knives themselves being vulnerable like that. But it would make sense that would happen, you know? And I couldn't stop laughing because Hohenheim is really struggling here. And Ed comes up behind him and says, oh, can't you even do this? Which, like, I'm the last person to be defending Hohenheim here, but Ed, he's basically fighting God at this point. Like, can't you even do this? Is the sort of thing that you say when you ask somebody to, like, pump your gas for you and they don't know how to turn, you know, like, can't you even do this when the man is holding back the force of creation? Does not feel quite just. And I was a little bit like, well, damn, chill out. So, oh, I'm sorry. There's a whole comment here from Max. Max says, yeah, I debated if I should have corrected you on that way back when there was the characters, thought that the stones they saw before was imperfect, but it was just that it was a battery that got drained. I don't know. Let's see. I'm sure that my first run through, I was probably confused by it too. I'm not actually sure what you're referring to there, Max. I feel like maybe there was a typo there that's kind of like undermining the sentence. I'm not sure. Way back when there was the characters thought that the stones they saw before was imperfect. I don't know. Damien says lungs got to start working again. Sure, but like, Damien, everything's got to start working again. You could easily, you could just as easily be like, everybody woke up from their near-death experience and shat their pants. Which I do not suggest, by the way, but it's just the idea of like, you know, we're just going to have it be coughing because we have to do something. And that's going to be the easiest way, especially like on something that's doing, you know, it's a sound-based and animation-based medium. It's going to be hard to get things across without having them do something vocally. Tyler says none of the stones are, quote, imperfect. They are just a battery powered by souls that burned out. Oh. Max says the stone the priest had was said to be imperfect, but instead it just ran out of power. Oh, I see what you guys are saying. Okay. So actually that kind of dovetails well with what my question was going to be. Because I couldn't really understand how these souls that Hohenheim sent out to sort of thwart Father, they're each one soul in each area, I think. And if that's so, how do they manage to stop or like fuck with a being that has as many souls working to power his shit up as Father does? And I don't know if it's supposed to be that like no particular stone is necessarily more powerful outright. They just last longer, some of them, than others do. Because I've been sort of interpreting it as like, the more souls you have, the more bang for your buck. Like, you could do a spell that's way bigger simply because the stone is like, I keep wanting to say more power, and that's not accurate. But you guys get what I'm saying, right? Like, I guess what I'm thinking of is sort of memory versus RAM. And so, well, RAM is memory. You know, hard drive memory versus RAM. So basically, I've been thinking about it as the more souls are in it, the more RAM it has. But really, it's just the more souls are in it, the more hard drive it has. So it's certainly more memory and it's more powerful if you want to use those words, but not in the way that I have been thinking of it as. Does that sound like a correct comparison to you all? Because if that's true, then maybe I could see these like individual stones overpowering Father, but I still don't really like, he's got so many in him that how isn't he able to resist for longer before all of them get pulled back out of him? Let's see. Tyler says, I think it's more all of them spread out working together versus Father, not any of them alone versus Father. But Father just has so many souls in him. That's the part that I'm sort of getting like confused by. I would think if it's like simply a matter of sort of endurance, that he would be able to completely outlast anything they can do to him and stop them from changing how this happened. Like, the only thing I could see really is if Hohenheim had like set them up, each of his Philosopher's Stones, like up along the same lines as the circle that Father was going to use, and had them targeted in such a way that it would stop the circle from functioning in the first place. But being able to like undo what Father did, that feels like kind of a lot for this handful of stones. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just like not really interpreting this right. I just wanted to put that out there because that was the thing that I kind of got hung up on the most watching this, was like, I really would think he'd be able to withstand whatever they threw at him because it would be somewhat short-lived. Anyway, let me know what you guys think. I'll come back. So in this moment, Hohenheim is like, all right, well, I'm going to give it my best shot. And we have Al coming up behind him and Ed coming up behind Al. And everybody is like trying to sort of support him from behind. And then we go back to the fight between Bradley and Scar. And it's a weird conversation where Bradley is sort of taunting Scar about believing in God. And seems to be trying to say basically that if you're fighting me with like rage in your heart, how can you say that you believe in your God? Like, you're acting against the principles that I thought you cared about and lived by. But he is like, I don't really even know how to describe the way that Bradley is moving here. But the only way that I can say it, and this is something that has been true of like most anime that I have covered so far, is when people are fighting, they are drawn as if they are in an arena and have all the space in the world to like flip around and run. Because the way that he's being animated here, it looks like he just sprinted a quarter mile flying through the air and doing all these like acrobatic moves before getting to Scar. But I think it's supposed to be like 15 feet, you know? Let's see. Tyler says, Hohenheim had an equal number, so he used a bunch as well. And I think they were set up in the shape of the anti-human transmutation circle from Scar's notes. Oh. I'll be honest, you guys, I don't even remember the anti-human transmutation circle. I don't even recall that. Max says, I guess I think of it like energy to fill up a water balloon versus poking a hole in it. It doesn't have to be equal. Father could have stopped what they were doing, maybe, but he didn't realize what was happening before it was too late. Okay, yeah, I could believe that. Just basically like sneak attack. So if he was prepped and was aware what he was fighting against, he could have stopped it. But because they just came up behind him with this like tiny little stiletto dagger and got him right in the kidney, that's it. Okay, I'll buy that. So anyway, Bradley and Scar have their final moment, and I swear to God, I laughed so hard, you guys. I really did. It was just so over the top. So Scar uses his alchemy to basically slice Bradley's hands off. And Bradley's blade, which broke and is flying through the air, he grabs the blade in his teeth and stabs Scar with it between his teeth, which is truly insane. Like, can you, like, in this universe, it's totally fine, but can you imagine actually trying to do that? Like, first of all, you would cut your mouth up real bad. And I know Bradley could give no fewer fucks about whether he cuts his mouth up. He has no hands and he's fine. However, I'm just saying. And then you'd have to like kind of grip, like hold it in place with your teeth while gripping it with your lips as well. And just like the sheer force you would need. And if it spins in your teeth a little bit too far, the whole blade could just spin a little and cut the like side of your head off. And what I'm saying is that this is a truly ridiculous moment, but I also felt like there is no other way for Bradley to go out because he is a bonkers man. And he is going to go out doing some bonkers shit, and that just lines up for me. So then laying there, realizing he's been defeated, he says something about how he didn't really know whether to believe in God, and it sort of went back and forth for him. And at this point, Lanfan walks up and he says, oh, maybe God or whoever sent me this like person to do the job for them. Go ahead. And she asks, do you have any last words? And he's like, no. And she says, nothing? There was nobody that you loved? Not your friends? Not your wife? You don't have anything? And Bradley says, because she's like, your wife is going to find out what you are and be pretty upset. You don't have anything that you want to say to her? And he says, all these attempts of like evoking love and guilt aren't going to work. My wife understands. She is the woman that I chose to live by my side. There are no more words that need to pass between us now. I'm going to tell you guys what. I don't know if this is like really actually as meaningful as it sounds, but this makes me deeply, deeply concerned. Because I'm pretty sure his wife is just a person who got fooled and married a maniac and didn't really know what was happening. That's what I've thought this whole time. And the way that he says this, she knew and I chose her to be by my side, that feels very like, oh, trust me, I may be gone, but this like cause isn't dying with me. And I don't think that's true. I really don't, but it sounds like it. There is something suspect here that I am just, because you guys know I had all of these ideas about how she would factor into things, considering that he and Salim both really seem to like her, and genuinely so. So I was thinking that maybe there would be like she would be a weak point for them that could be exploited. And that hasn't turned out to be absolutely anything. She's just a mouthpiece at the moment sitting in this radio station, seemingly completely unaware of all of the various turns of events that are happening until somebody tells her. But what if that's not all it is? And this is the kind of thing where I don't want to I don't want to focus on it too much in case it does really turn out to be nothing. And I've just wasted a bunch of time theorizing about a thing that doesn't matter at all. But I really did have a moment here of like a frisson going up my back, being like, wait, maybe she's more than she looks like too. Like what, you know, I don't even know what she would be, because I don't think she's a homunculus. Like, it seems pretty clear that's not really the thing. But also, a lot of the generals that were on the Führer's side weren't homunculi either, and they were still in on everything. So, I don't know. I wanted to put it out there. But yeah, essentially, like, what it breaks down to is just kill me, because I don't have any last words to say, And finally, oh, wait, I'm dying anyway. You're not going to get your vengeance after all. You waited too long. That sucks. And he says, I lived my life forever by a path set for me. Thanks to the idiosyncrasies of humanity, it was at least a life worth living for. And maybe even a life worth dying for. And he closes his eyes and dies. And he doesn't actually dissipate into dust the way that the others did because, you know, he was like a person to begin with. But the whole, like, I am a person, my life was one worth living because I did what I was told is a really weird take. And if that's the way you want to play it, Bradley, by all means, you get to determine the way you view your own life. But that feels like a strange flex to me. And it is not something that I would like be bragging about. Just being like, well, somebody set the parameters for what my life was going to be, and I did it, and I'm proud of that. I mean, I suppose, you know, he's just a machine, really, in that scenario. And maybe that's exactly what he likes. So at this point, Lan Fan senses something, and she reaches down and looks through his pocket, and she finds a Philosopher's Stone. And Scar is like, I need you to take me over there. And she says, but that circle is broken. And he's like, just do it. So she manages to like pick him up, and he kneels at the circle and says, brother, I cannot lie. The hatred within me has not perished. And yet I am about to help Amestris, the very object of my hatred. You spoke of positive streams and negative streams. Thanks to the life I have lived, I carry both within me. And he puts his hand on the circle and says, I wonder which way I will flow. And as he does this, we see light stream out and create circles in all of these other directions. And it's the other type of circle that we have seen before. And what is this? Alchemist. All of this, like these boxes that were put in place are the various points of this circle. I don't know when these were put in place, if this was something that they were like secretly doing while they, maybe in that like 6-month gap, but that we jumped over in time. I don't know if I was supposed to have noticed them setting this up or if it was very purposely like left out and I wasn't supposed to notice. But it looks like they had to have established this beforehand. And he gets this going, and all of a sudden Hohenheim says it's starting. And all of this energy that they are trying to hold back, it's like what they were holding back is destroyed. Like the power that they're fighting against from Father, they managed to stop it. But he was coming at them using, I think, alchemy to like bend the pipes that had been attached to his seat. And they're all dug into the floor right in front of where their circle had started. And there's a suggestion here from Ed, like, how do you like that? Now it's time to put an end to you. And I was thinking, he's not down by any means, though, and I'm not really sure how much to trust that he is essentially unarmed now, the way that Ed seems to be believing. So then we go to Lan Fan, and she's like, what was that? Was that alchemist? And Scar says, no, it was something my brother developed. He researched the science of alchemy. From there, his interests led him to begin looking in the art of alchemistry. Alchemistry is an art that uses the flow of chi that's going through the ground. But this country's alchemy uses tectonic energy. My brother realized something. alchemists weren't able to use their power to its full measure. There was a problem with the connection between the alchemist and that energy. So this is what L'Enfant, like everybody who uses alchemy and is used to that system, ever since they got to Amestris, they've been like, why does it feel so fucking weird here? What is wrong? And L'Enfant is like, yeah, see, we said that it was like a bunch of people crawling under the earth. And Scar is like, exactly. That was the enormous Philosopher's Stone that stretches underground throughout this land. So apparently all of those tubes and pipes are meant to be full of souls. And every time they've ever been using alchemy, this whole time they've been using souls to do it? Or the souls are being used to connect them with the tectonic energy they were like accessing? That is, where did he get all of those lives from? Is that just over the course of like the setting up of each of the circles for the bigger circle? You know, like, I'm a little bit confused by how this is going. But like because that's what I'm interpreting this as, is that all of those pipes, it's like hot and cold running souls, basically. That they're all full of souls the way that like Father is full or Hohenheim is full. Except if they're being used to power alchemy, you would need so many. For everybody to be using alchemy the way that they do, pretty much at the drop of a hat, and the number of people who can do it, how many would you need in order to make sure that the supply doesn't run out? Unless I'm misinterpreting what it is that he's trying to explain here. So let's see. Yeah, here it is. Hohenheim says Scar created a reverse circle that will correct the corrupted alchemy of this country. It was Scar's brother. Through tireless research, he discovered a secret long kept: the existence of the nationwide transmutation circle. Using that as his base, he applied his knowledge of alchemy and developed what is known now as a reverse transmutation circle that would render the Philosopher's Stone of Amestris ineffective, thus enabling the alchemists to harness the tectonic energy to its fullest extent. So, here's my question. He says, thus enabling the alchemists here to once again harness tectonic energy to its fullest extent. So I had been thinking, I'm realizing like the way he said that is sort of at odds with the way I thought this. What I thought Scar was saying was that they use tectonic power in it to power alchemy, and they couldn't quite reach it or connect with it properly. So they created this giant Philosopher's Stone in order to be able to connect with it more effectively. But I guess what it actually is that Hohenheim is saying here, they have been kept from the full potential of connecting with the tectonic magic by the presence of the Philosopher's Stone. How? Why would that happen? And why would anybody want to keep them from accessing it? Is it because they'd be so powerful that they could fight back? Is this like meant to be basically a giant way to handicap everybody? I don't know. But Ed starts like going after Father, and he really thinks like Father is super weakened here. But Father fights back without much effort expended. And Hohenheim has to be like, okay, he will run out of energy, but only if we manage to wear him down. And I was like appreciative that Hohenheim was like, we have just got to try. I don't know how long it'll take. Because Ed seemed to think, okay, now you're totally vulnerable. And I was like, that does not sound like it is true. I feel like he has the soul still in him that he started with, which was nothing. So everybody begins to hit him with all their own attacks. We have Hohenheim continuing to like redirect those pipes. We have Izumi shooting from that giant weird cannon that she has set up. Greed jumps in and he says this weird line. That's exactly the tub I took a bath in. Now it's your turn, Daddy. Which truly, if there is a less badass line, I would like to hear it. Because that is embarrassing. That is like, I don't even know. That feels like something that if George Costanza said it on Seinfeld, it would be the entire episode that he grew up hearing this as a thing you say, and he's finding out nobody says that. That feels like it's just such a, and it's probably like based on like a Japanese saying, but in translation it sounds so weird, and I just really hated it. So they're coming at him, and Greed, having like abandoned father at one point, Pride is watching him and is like, man, how can you have any self-respect and be acting this way? This dude is supposed to be the guy like on your side. And at that point he's talking about Bradley, but Greed is unbothered still. He doesn't care about who people think he should be beholden to and loyal to. So the floor cracks open and there's this giant like cauldron of melted metal that they try to pour over Father to burn him to death, but he just basically uses it to make a really giant escalator and shoot himself up into the air and out of the room. And once he does that, the Armstrongs and Sig and the other like Briggs soldiers come running in. We have a really cute reunion between Sig and Izumi. Like, she jumps on him and it's adorable. Meanwhile, outside, Father has landed in the courtyard and is dropping everybody. And he looks down at the palm of his hand and we see this tiny little hole. And it looks like it's just a Philosopher's Stone. I couldn't tell if it's like a stone that's been embedded there or if it's supposed to be that he sustained a little bit of damage and he can see the damage for the first time. Or when he looks at it, Hohenheim says, that bastard, he's going to try and make another Philosopher's Stone. And the way he says it, it's like he could read Father's mind. And I'm not entirely sure if that's what's supposed to be happening there. If he already has because like Father did say I can just make another one, but the way that Hohenheim says it sounds like at this moment Father came up with a plan, like is a very specific thing he is about to try and do. So him and Ed do the escalator thing. Poor Mustang is left behind and he has his hand over his mouth and is just like, I had no idea when it came down to it that I was going to be this useless. And he's like really bummed. I felt for him a lot here. I don't like this guy, and you guys know he just irritates me. But when you have had your plan in place this long, so much of it has gone according to plan. It's been pretty fucking effective, all things considered. And you're feeling like you've really got it. And then they manage to fucking blind you. I mean, it's hard to not get super discouraged at that point. I really just, this poor dude. And there is a moment where he gets reunited with Hawkeye and she starts like freaking out about whether like his eyes, because he asks her, how are you doing? And she's like, don't worry about me. And he has to say, no, Lieutenant, can you fight? And when she hears him like get businesslike, she realizes that he is not done. He's not letting the fact that he can't see hinder the completion of the mission that she agreed to. And she immediately like firms up and goes, yes, sir, I can still fight. So this is when we get the bit that I found so funny. Greed, he has run up the wall and winds up in the upper floor where he sees Wrath dead on the floor. And he says they finally got him. And there's a long pause, and then he says, bastard dies with that peaceful look on his face. Pisses me off. I absolutely could not stop laughing. That is the truest shit. Like, somebody that you despise so much that even their death isn't quite good enough because they like died well. They died in circumstances that you feel like they didn't even really deserve that. I just truly, that shit was hysterical to me. So, Damien says Father had created a quickie stone from the Briggs soldiers. How did he do it? He created a circle? How did he do it that fast? He like came up, landed in the courtyard, and then killed them, and I didn't even see him do a circle to like, don't you have to do that in order to make a stone? Or does he not have to do it that way anymore? Or did I miss it? I just didn't see it. But a lot is happening. As you guys can tell, it's like everything I can do to keep up with a lot of this. So at this point, this is when Greed is like, or not Greed, Pride says, Greed, have you forgotten that you're one of the homunculi? Like, what is your problem? And it's interesting because he's sort of yelling at Greed, who's the floor above him, but Ed is the one in front of him, and they're still fighting, and Ed is mocking Pride for just doing whatever his father told him and never asking any questions and being a good boy. And he says, why are you so willing to be his lapdog? He's wearing you ragged and breaking you down, and he doesn't even care. And Pride says, why should I care? I'm not a puny weakling like you are. I'm one of the homunculi. What do you know? And then he pulls his hand away from his face. And it's so creepy, guys. He is using the shadows to hold on to Ed. And it's like he has made the shadows around Ed's face into knives that are yanking his mouth open. And he says that this container won't last much longer. But you and I, Ed, we're practically brothers since Father is like made from Hohenheim. So I can use your body as a container, no problem. And he starts to say, like, I'm about to take that shit. And then all of a sudden, the bit of void that's been like peeking out with its eyeballs gets yanked back into his body. And we go inside and we see Kimberly and says, oh, no, you're absolutely not taking that body. That's not a good fit for you. What? And Pride is like, how can you possibly be still like yourself? You're in the midst of this nightmare storm of souls. How have you maintained your individuality? And Kimberly says, oh, this? Are you serious? These voices are soothing to me. Okay, that's amazing. I am loving this. We found somebody who is such a complete psychopath that the screaming of souls in torment has absolutely no effect at all. And it never occurred to me that that could be like a real boon. But apparently in this situation. So Pride is like, all right, granted, but why are you interfering? And Kimberly says, I didn't want to interfere. I was willing to like work with you guys, but then you had to kind of renege on our deal. And you're named Pride. but you immediately scrapped your pride the moment that you were in danger. And now you want to like jump into the body of a person, which is a life form that you find despicable. How can you call yourself pride? You're a disgrace. And pride seems so stunned that at this point, Ed has an opening and he like breaks free of the bonds and he grabs Pride by the face. And Pride says, he's going to kill me. And inside his head, Kimberly is saying, if you think that, you don't understand Edward Elric. And I love this. We see Ed climbing into Salim's mind. This is amazing. He turned himself into a philosopher's stone, and now he's forcing his way inside me. I don't even understand how that can be. I'm extremely confused, guys. And he grabs Pride inside his brain. We see like these memories flashing through, and Pride is saying, please stop, as Kimberly waves goodbye and leaves. And then Salim's clothing drops to the ground as what had been his body just vaporizes. And when Ed pulls his hand back, he looks in the palm and there is a teeny tiny little baby. I will be honest, I have no idea what happened. I don't get this at all. So, let's see. Tyler says he and Hohenheim can just not use circles. I didn't realize that something like that you could just not use circles. I knew that they just didn't in general, but I didn't realize that something that enormous, you could just not use them. I thought that was a necessity. Okay. Max says, my understanding could be wrong. All those pipes allowed Father to have the ability to stop alchemy in the country whenever he wanted, but he wasn't doing that all the time. There was that time when Ed and Al were here before, and he was able to stop their alchemy. Ed and team realized this could happen again and used Scar's brother's knowledge to figure out a way to handle it for this fight. Okay. I'm just really wondering where he's getting the souls to like do that huge a spread over the entire country. But regardless, this moment with Ed turning himself into a philosopher's stone, how does that work? I truly, guys, I am like almost out of time and I don't even know how to begin to theorize how that works. But it feels like that shouldn't work. And I just, this episode is packed with like moments like this that I feel like I don't really get it. And y'all are explaining some things to me and some of it's hitting and some of it's not. And I don't know if it's just that I'm not really understanding what you mean, or if that some of the explanations just don't really hold water for me. I'm going to lean to the side of that I just don't get it. And probably if I was able to have like more of a back and forth conversation, you could get me to see what you meant. But it's hard, with everybody just being in the chat trying to explain it all and me interpreting what you're saying. But even without a transmutation circle, I don't know how Ed sacrifices himself, gets inside Salim's head, and then still manages to like have a body out, like to go back to. I don't understand this at all. Whatever it is, like he wins and he leaves Pride there, tiny little baby. And I find that particularly interesting that like the form that when Envy is tiny is just this ugly monster and Pride is just this teeny tiny baby. there feels like there's something poetic about that. I kind of wish that we had gotten to see what lust was when she was just like at her teeniest, most regular form. But that's the end of the episode. Ed walks away and basically is like, I'm going to have to apologize to your mama. And that's it. So maybe I'm not supposed to know how he did it and it's going to get explained. But yeah, this lost me here. Max says, nah, I definitely had to look stuff up after the show to get a better understanding and multiple rewatches. Okay. I appreciate that because I really don't want to like be an idiot here. But I also, as you guys know, I can't go looking for any information because I'll get spoiled. So I can do plenty of research after the fact. But in the midst of it, there's only so much I can do. Tyler said Ed did use himself as a stone once to heal himself. Oh. That was in the tunnels, right? When he was with the two Chimera? I vaguely remember this. I feel like I had kind of an issue with it then too. I don't know. If anybody feels like they have a non-spoilery explanation that they can offer, feel free to in the Discord. But if it's something that I have to kind of just wait and watch and see, that's fine. I get that. Also, obviously, I'm going to just double check this, but all right. So yeah, wow. I'm guessing that like the final episode of coverage, there's going to be a bunch of stuff that you guys are going to want me to know. And I'm trying to figure out exactly how to work that out. It probably would have been good to have like just a wrap up episode, but we won't be able to do that. So I'm going to have to talk about the final episode as well as maybe have read some stuff that you guys send me. So I'll try my best to like balance that out without it spoiling me. Damien says, yep. And then info dump. Yeah. That's basically like kind of what I'm waiting for. I do like Ed using himself as a stone to heal himself. Here's my issue with this. And again, I think I had a problem with that at the time as well. Even if I didn't, I kind of do side-eye that. But that aside, if the last time we ever saw him do this was him healing himself, like ages ago at this point, it just really feels like the show is meant more for people who have read the manga, because so little of this stuff feels quite adequately explained to me. Like, I felt pretty lost at a few points these past 3 episodes. A huge amount of action, and like, granted, a lot of people aren't going to be watching it trying to actively make it make sense every step of the way. They're going to just kind of let things wash over them. But nevertheless, there's a lot to keep track of with the way magic works in this world. And if you're going to have Ed use himself as a stone like 20 episodes earlier, and then have this happen now, and there's no like connection, there's no mention of it in the meantime, there's no real like sort of explanation to refresh the audience, it feels like not great writing to me. You've got to keep your people up to speed on what the fuck is going on. Like, honestly, in some ways, Max having to go and do a bunch of research to look things up after feels like that's a problem. It's one thing to get info that's in addition so that you feel like the universe is even deeper and has a lot more to offer even than what you got to see. But if there's shit that kind of like doesn't make sense to you to the degree that you have to go reading up on it, that doesn't feel like you did a good job to me. And I'm not trying to say that the show isn't good, because you guys know I've been really enjoying it. But in terms of like the pacing of everything, it has been quite breakneck. And maybe we could have slowed down and explored like the fundamentals of how some of this magic works to a point that would make it a little easier to follow in some of these respects. It just doesn't seem like the way it's conveyed to the audience isn't organized well. Does that make sense? Damien says some of it isn't even explained in the manga. It takes a few rewatches to understand. This show lends itself well to binge watching because things come in a much more rapid fire manner and you go, oh, about things. Okay. So that's not great. Like, right? I mean, that's not to say that the show isn't good again, but if you need to watch things back to back, because otherwise you completely forget about stuff and you need to be able to rewatch it multiple times to even quite understand what's happening. I just feel like that's a serious weakness. That feels like this show has up to now been really careful about making sure to explain everything. And it's just like in these last, probably I'd say the last like 3 episodes have been the biggest offenders in terms of dropping stuff on us and not really giving it any space to breathe so that we know what the significance is in some parts of it. And I find that to be kind of a shame because if some of the stuff you guys are explaining to me is correct and I'm just not understanding it, then clearly there was a plan and the person writing this had their idea in place. It's not like they were just pulling rules out of their ass or breaking rules because they felt like it. They obviously had their whole system in mind when they were setting it all up. And I just hate to see when a lot of work feels like it went into the foundations of an idea and then the actual execution doesn't really adequately like display the intricacies of the plan and that it's not being served well, you know? I feel like if you've got a really good plan for this, it deserved better in terms of the way the audience is shown how the pieces all fit together. So, and Tyler said, nothing's perfect. These are valid criticisms. Damien says, yeah, this is when she was racing against the clock and was like, gotta finish before the anime catches up to me. So the manga was rushing towards the end, so the anime was following suit. That's a shame because, see, if she wasn't trying to finish before the anime, what we could have done is had the anime just slow down. She's not able to maybe like tell everything in the manga, but she gives that info to the people who are writing the anime and they include that in such a manner that it stretches their time span out and gives her a little bit of extra breathing room. And at least in the show, adequate explanation is given, even if she wasn't able to fit it into the manga, so that at least in one place it would exist. You know, it's just funny to me that like the manga is trying to do the exact same pacing as she is, but why? That's not helping the storytelling and it's not helping her. So just back off a little bit and add a little bit here and there. There was an episode, I think like 5 or 6 ago that I thought, yeah, we could have had a lot more right here actually. And they just didn't explore this. I feel like it could have helped her out a lot too. It's just interesting to me how many, you know, in One Piece, there are so many filler arcs and filler episodes and stuff where they just like stretch things out and they didn't have any additional content, to be honest. It's not like they just made all of these long drawn out shots and characters staring and all of this. They just added that to fill in the time. But here, you could have drawn it out a lot more and really you had the content to do it with. You should have done it. It would have, like, I think, helped make these final episodes a lot more satisfying to watch because, like, that moment with Scar, for example, where he uses creation alchemy instead of the destruction one that he had been, which felt like it was supposed to be kind of a moment and it didn't really hit for me. And part of it is because I just don't feel like they really I just don't feel like that was set up as well as it could have been. And if we got to spend more time with him, maybe that moment would be, you know what I'm saying? So anyway, all this to just say, I feel like the setup seems to be there. I just don't like feeling as if I'm flailing around, feeling as if I missed something sometimes. So we'll just have to get an info dump, I guess. I guess that's what's going to have to happen. But I just can't believe there's only 3 episodes after this, you guys. There's like, we're in the middle of a crazy moment here and only 3 more episodes to wrap this up. Like how? What? 3? That's it? That doesn't seem right. All right, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you again to Max for commissioning this. I am so over time. Oh my God. Thank you to you all for hanging out and giving me info. Appreciate you all. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.